freeways, trains, and apartment buildings in Kobe. As U.S. citizens observe Martin Luther King Day, some attorneys are preparing to argue a Supreme Court case that could change hiring practices across the United States. And O.J. Simpson's lawyers may be talking to the news media, but apparently some of them aren't talking to one another. Hello and welcome to World News, everyone. From CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Lyndon Souls. Bobby Batista is off. We begin in Kobe, Japan, where fires still burn and rescue crews are still looking for victims of a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. It struck about 5.5 hours ago, just before dawn Tuesday in Japan. CNN's Bill Dorman joins us now live on the telephone from Tokyo with more details. Bill?
Lyndon, the story from Kobe continues to be a dark one at this hour. Japanese media quoting police now put the death toll at 181. 480 more are seriously injured and more than 300 are reported as missing. Fires broke out in several parts of Kobe. Rescue crews are still working to contain the flames in some areas. Black plumes of smoke are billowing over sections of the city. The quake's damage was magnified because of its location close to Kobe, which is a busy port city of 1.5 million people. Right now, Japan's self-defense forces are working to free more than 200 people trapped under collapsed buildings. Entire sections of the main freeway between Kobe and Osaka, Japan's second largest city, snapped and fell. Trains were knocked off their tracks, though because of the early hour, they were not jammed with morning commuters. At this hour, the chief concerns focus on rescuing those more than 200 people trapped under the rubble of Kobe's buildings. Crews are also searching for more than 300 others reported as missing. Lyndon?
Bill, how much more serious would the damage and destruction from this quake have been if it had struck perhaps an hour or two later?
Devastating. If you have train tracks that are filled with morning commuters on the rush hour, the damage in terms of human life would have been much worse. Although, again, as flames are still engulfing parts of the city, it is too early to tell, other than the damages are certain to rise from here.
Now, we've learned in earlier reports this evening that there is an extensive earthquake preparedness program in effect for the general population there. How has the response been from emergency personnel themselves? I mean, do they have fairly extensive earthquake response programs in place?
Emergency personnel here in Japan are very well trained to deal with earthquakes. Earthquakes are a fairly common occurrence in Japan, although the scale of these are the events that people prepare for, they drill for, but there is really no way to prepare for the random devastation of an earthquake of this magnitude.
Are people there, perhaps some of the seismic scientists, characterizing this as perhaps what we might call the big one in relation to other quakes that they've had recently?
Well, it's bigger than quakes that have recently struck Japan, although when you use the phrase the big one, that usually refers to, in point of reference, the Great Kanto earthquake of the 1920s, where the devastation was even more widespread, absolutely brutal. As I say, Japan is a country that is used to earthquakes, but in terms of preparing urban centers in particular for the devastation, that is a difficult task. Aftershocks also always a concern in any earthquake. Certainly that's the case with this one. There have been several strong earthquakes recently in northern Japan, but the one today in Kobe is stronger than anything that has been seen in years in Japan.
Bill, just to advise you and our viewers at home, we are seeing now a live feed from NHK television in Japan as they cover the aftermath of the devastation. What has been the response from people there? In terms of some witnesses that we talked to earlier, they said people were dazed, rather shocked. What have the subsequent aftershocks done to their state of mind at this point?
Reports are still coming in terms of witnesses and how they are dealing with the devastation, with the aftermath of this earthquake. As I mentioned, Japan's self-defense forces, basically the army here, is trained in earthquake rescue operations. They are working on that at this hour. As I say, there are several hundred people trapped under buildings still. And in terms of the general populace, as I say, earthquakes are an ever-present danger in Japan. They are something that people are aware of, but there is no way to prepare yourself physically or psychologically for the devastation that can be wreaked by such a quake.
I understand it's difficult to get confirmation under the circumstances because telephone lines have come down. Communication has been wiped out for the time being in many areas. We had received an initial report from NHK that a hospital had collapsed in the town of Takarazuka, but they could not confirm at the time whether there had been extensive casualties or not. Have you heard anything on that since?
I cannot confirm that. We have no confirmation or reports of that.
All right. Just very quickly before we go to somebody who actually lived through the quake in Kobe itself, can you paint a picture for us of the geographic lay of the land, so to speak, in that particular area on Osaka Bay?
Well, it is, as I say, it is one of Japan's major cities. I believe it's the sixth largest in Japan. It is it's a port city, about 1.5 million people. It's a little more than 20 miles away from Osaka, which is the second largest city in Japan. That puts it a little less than 200 miles from Tokyo. As I say, it is a major commercial center. It is a port city. And it is part of a larger busy section, the corridor between Kobe and Osaka.
All right. Can I just reconfirm with you, Bill, the numbers that you've got right now in terms of casualties and injured?
Right now, the latest reports that we have from Japanese media quoting police on the scene is 178 dead, 480 seriously injured, and more than 330 still missing at this hour.
Okay, and we are receiving various accounts as communication lines are established, as you can well imagine. Bill Dorman in Tokyo, I'm going to ask you to stand by, please. Thank you very much for that information. I've just got some new information coming now from government officials through the Reuters news agency that is showing at least 13,000 people injured in that earthquake on Honshu Island. And NHK television is now reporting that the death toll has risen to at least 197, and I would presume it will possibly go higher as more bodies are discovered in the rubble of a lot of buildings that have been collapsed as a result of the earthquake. Joining us now on the telephone from Kobe is U.S. businessman Ben Dealey, who was there this morning when the quake hit. We talked to him a little bit earlier this evening. Ben, for the benefit of those people who hadn't joined us at that time,